Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful, creepy human being you, and welcome to today's true crime episode. I am so happy that you are here. I'm so happy that somehow in all of this that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the murder of 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten. On Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, in the town of St. Martin's, Missouri, a small and beautiful area of just over 1,000 people that was said to be the perfect place to raise a family, a place where there really wasn't much crime and basically everyone knew everyone. A woman named Patty was getting worried because her daughter, this was 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten, hadn't come home yet. It was after 6 p.m. at this point and starting to get dark, and Patty had told her daughter that she needed to be home by this time. So she picked up her phone and she called the home of a woman named Karen. Now, Karen was the grandmother to a girl named Emma, and Emma was Elizabeth's friend who had come over earlier that evening and asked if Elizabeth could come over and play. So Patty calls over to the house. She speaks to Karen and she asks Karen if Karen wouldn't mind sending Elizabeth home if she was still there. And that's when Karen tells Patty that she's not there and she hasn't been there at all that day. Hours went by and then days, and police were in full-on search mode. They had people on the ground. They had people in the sky, helicopters in the sky. They had roadblocks set up, stopping every single person who was driving in and out of the area if they had any information on the disappearance of Elizabeth, but they were getting nowhere. That was until, while conducting a search in a nearby home, the police found some writings, and these writings were very disturbing, and they implicated an individual that nobody would have suspected would have done something like this. And once it was revealed what exactly had happened to Elizabeth and why, it rocked this community in a way that I don't know if I'm going to be able to properly express, but I'm going to try. But first, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. Now, before we do get into the details of today's case, I first need to say a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Dossier. Dossier is a fragrance company that creates luxury scents, but at a fraction of the luxury price point, where many luxury brands' perfumes can cost anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars. Dossier's fragrances range from $29 to $49. And I've got great new and exciting news. Dossier is carried at CVS. I'm so happy they're doing this for those of us who really like their product, because now we can literally just walk into somewhere as convenient and like easily accessible as CVS. So I was able to get these 2 cents these 2 cents. I was like talking but not showing. I was able to get these 2 cents to share with you today. Well, I can't share them with you. They're mine, but you can go get your own if you want. This one is Gourmand Vanilla, and it's inspired by Tom Ford's Vanilla Sex. A Day Perfume. And this one here is Ambery Rose, which is inspired by Parfums de Mali in Delina A Day Perfume, which is a scent that I had never tried before, and I've never heard of that original perfume, but it smells so pretty. It is floral, but it's like the type of floral that I think even if you're not crazy about florals, you would like this one. I think you would like both of these, because like I like both of these. And we're friends, right? Right. So that's just me showing you what I picked up. Obviously, there are a lot of different fragrances that you can pick from. So if you are interested in picking up a perfume, you can use the link in my description box and use the code BRATTERSTEIN at checkout to get a discount for a limited time. It's a 10% discount for members of the Brat Pack for a limited time. So if all that sounds as good to you as it does to me, make sure to click the link at the top of my description box to let them know I'm the one that sent you. It helps out my channel. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just literally walk into a CVS and pick up a bottle. Either way, there are many options for you to go ahead and pick up your favorite perfumes today. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to Dossier for partnering with me on today's video. It's partners like Dossier that make it possible for me to put out videos as consistently as I do. And a big thank you to you guys for always being so supportive of all of my sponsors. You rock, don't ever change. So now, with all of that said, today I'm going to tell you the entire story of the murder of Elizabeth Olten. I read all the things so that you do not have to, and at the end of this video, I want to ask you the question of the day. I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain as we go through the details of this case, but of course I want you to answer once we have something to go on. And the question of the day is this. Do you think because of the age of Elizabeth's murderer, they should ever have the opportunity for parole? After hearing everything that happened here, you let me know all your thoughts in the comments below, because I am curious to hear what you have to say. And now, with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the murder of 9-year-old Elizabeth Olten. Elizabeth Olten was born on November 15th, 1999, and she was born in Jefferson City in Missouri, and she was the only daughter of parents Patty and Dale. Elizabeth was a miracle to her mother. She was the youngest with 2 older siblings, and the day that Patty found out that she was pregnant was actually the day that she found out that she had stage 4 cervical cancer. And she said that Elizabeth saved her life. Elizabeth was said to be an incredibly happy little girl, with her aunt saying that she was, quote, the morning sun that popped out over the mountain. She was sunshine, and you couldn't help but love her. At the time she was killed, she was 9 years old. She was a 4th grader at Pioneer Trails Elementary School, where she was a very good student with lots of friends. And she was just said to be a very sweet, very typical, but also very special young girl. She loved baking with her mother. She loved playing dress up, particularly with her animals. And she was the type of little girl, like many, that loved animals, specifically cats and horses. And growing up where she lived in St. Martin's, was the perfect place for a child who was growing up with the love of horses, because this was the type of area that actually had the amount of land that one would need to have to like own horses and have them on their property. She loved stuffed animals and dolls and Care Bears and the colors pink and purple. She loved reading and she loved music. She especially loved Hannah Montana and Taylor Swift. And her love of music was actually what caused her to try out and be accepted as being in a musical. I know I didn't word that correctly, but she was going to be in a musical like at her school. And she was actually at home practicing for this musical while her mom made dinner the day that she was killed. So let's talk about that. On the evening of Wednesday, October 21st, 2009, a 6-year-old girl named Emma came and knocked on the door of the home that Elizabeth shared with her mother with her family and asked if Elizabeth could come out and play. Elizabeth and Emma were neighbors. They lived just a couple houses away from each other, and they were friends, and they often played with each other. The families played with each other. Like, Emma had older brothers who played with Elizabeth's brothers. It was a totally normal thing for these 2 girls to do on any given day. Now, initially, when Elizabeth went to her mother and asked if she could go out and play, at first her mom said that she didn't think so. She was cooking dinner at this time. Dinner was almost ready. It was going to be getting dark soon. And she just was like, I don't know if now's the best time for this. But of course, Elizabeth, like any little girl would, she kind of begged and pleaded with her mom. So eventually her mother agreed and was like, okay, you can go, but you need to be back before dark, which would have been at about 6 p.m. And Patty wasn't particularly worried about Elizabeth coming back when she was supposed to for 2 reasons. 1, she always did. She was a very reliable little girl. She'd listen to what her mom said. And 2, Elizabeth was afraid of the dark. So since it was going to be getting dark at that time, there wasn't something in her brain at all that would make her think that Elizabeth would choose to stay out after dark, because she would have been scared. So Elizabeth and Emma leave Elizabeth's house. They walk over to Emma's house and they play for a while before, according to Emma, Elizabeth says that she needs to leave. She needs to go home like she was told. So they say their goodbyes and Elizabeth starts walking home, and Emma stands up on a rock to watch her friend walk. Since they lived close, she could kind of see her. But she ended up getting down from the rock and playing by herself before she saw if her friend made it home safely. Which, she was 6. I'm the type of person that when my friends leave, they are in their car before I take my eyes off them. They are in their car, the car is on, and they are driving before I take my eyes off them. But she was 6, you know what I mean? She's like, I'm going to go find some bugs or play with chalk or whatever a 6-year-old would do. But she's not thinking about the dangers of her friend getting home. So back at Elizabeth's house, Patty's getting concerned because it is past 6 p.m. It is dark outside and Elizabeth isn't home yet. So Patty actually tries calling Elizabeth's cell phone over and over, because even though she was 9, she did have a cell phone because she was able to go out and play by herself. And though we want to be able to let our kids do these types of things, it isn't the safest world in the world. Okay. So she got her daughter a cell phone so that they could stay in touch. So she's calling it over and over, but nobody's picking it up. So this is when she starts to get really worried. She calls over and she speaks to Karen, Emma's grandmother, and asks hey, if Elizabeth's still there, will you please send her home? And this is when Karen tells her she's not here and she hasn't been here at all today, which was not true. Karen just didn't know that Elizabeth had come over because the girls had stayed playing inside. She just never saw her come over. But Patty doesn't know that. Patty doesn't know because, this is all happening so quickly. So she just hears that her daughter hasn't been there and she panics. So she sends her older son to go outside and to look for his sister. But when he comes back and says that there's no sign of Elizabeth anywhere, she immediately calls the police and reports her daughter missing. Hours went by and Elizabeth was not found. By 10 p.m. that evening, they were in full-on search mode, dude. They had police all over the place. They had the roadblocks, as I said, in effect, where they were literally pulling over like every car to ask them if they had seen anything, if they had heard anything. There were cops everywhere searching on foot, searching the neighborhood, searching the woods. And it wasn't just the cops either. A lot of neighbors came out and wanted to show support to the family and do everything they could to try to locate this 9-year-old girl. But hours and hours went by and there was no sign of her. And that's like crazy because there were literally hundreds of people out there doing everything they could to try to find her. So the next morning when police, the fire department, the neighbors, when nobody was able to find any sign of her, the police decided that they were going to ping her phone. I think they had already been in the process of trying to do that, but all of these things take time. And since they weren't able to find her, they got the permission to ping her phone, and they did. Because remember, she has a cell phone. Luckily, she had a phone. And so they pinged the phone, and they're able to see that the last place she was actually like on her property, or more specifically, it was in the 60 acres of woods that was behind her property. So this is where they started focusing their search, because before they're looking like everywhere. Now they're like, okay, we need to specifically be looking here. So there's cops out there with cadaver dogs. There's divers for the bodies of water because it's woods. There's like water in the woods. They've got divers. They've got helicopters that are overhead, and they're searching and they're searching and they're searching. And it takes so long that finally Elizabeth's phone dies, so they can no longer even like follow this ping to get closer to where she actually was. So since they hadn't been able to recover Elizabeth, and now they didn't even have her cell phone to like track her last known location, police knew that they needed to speak to Emma more thoroughly. But she's only 6 years old, so obviously speaking to her and questioning her is going to be unique. They had to bring in like a child counselor, I believe is what it is. It's somebody who specializes in questioning young kids, because you have to question them differently than you would question an adult, because it's just, science. So she sits down with police officials, the counselor, her grandma, and she tells them what happened that day. And she tells them exactly pretty much what I already told you, that she had walked over to Elizabeth's house that day, asked if she wanted to play. The two had walked back together. They played for a while, and then Elizabeth left because she needed to get home. The cops asked Emma, like, is it possible that she would have walked through the woods to get home? And Emma said, like, no, she and I never went in the woods. But as she continued being questioned, Emma's story changed a little bit. She tells police that she was playing with Elizabeth, but the two of them were not playing in front of her house. They were actually playing in the woods behind her house, which is completely different from saying, like, no, we never went in the woods. This is now placing her where, in like the area where her phone would have last been pinged, right? So she's telling him this. And she says that they had been playing and she had dropped something in a ditch where there were like thorn bushes. So she had tried to get whatever this item was. She got stuck trying to get it. And then she accidentally cut her hand. So being 6 years old and all, she started screaming. She's like crying and screaming. She needs help. And that's when her sister, this is Alyssa Bustamante, she hears her sister crying because she's in the house, supposedly, and hears the noise through an open window. So she goes out to help her sister. So while Emma was being helped by her sister Alyssa, she says that she noticed that there was a stain of blood on the thigh of Alyssa's pants. And when she asked her sister, like, what that was, how did she get hurt? Alyssa told her that she was on her period, not to worry about it, and definitely not to tell anyone about the blood. So in hearing this, police are like, we should probably talk to this girl, Alyssa, because that's weird. Don't tell anyone about the blood. That's weird. That's suspicious. So they bring her into the police station so that they can talk to her about this, question her about her day on the day that Elizabeth went missing. And while they're talking to her, something very strange happened, something very concerning. So they're questioning her, and at the same time, police are still searching the woods behind the homes that, Elizabeth and also Emma lived in, because that's the area where her phone had last pinged. And when they're out there searching, they find something. It wasn't Elizabeth, but it was something that was very ominous. They found what appeared to be a grave. There was literally a pre-dug grave in the woods behind Elizabeth's home. Now, when they found this hole in the ground, they were interviewing Alyssa. And since they were interviewing her, they were like, you know what we should do? We should take this girl, this teenage girl, to the location of this pre-dug grave and show it to her and ask her about it. So they do just that. They take her to the hole and they're like, hey, have you ever seen this? And she's like, oh yeah, I dug that hole. And they asked, like, why would you do something so fucking weird? They don't say that, but that's what they're thinking. And she just said that she liked to dig holes. She said that she got bored very easily and that she was the type of kid that when she got bored, she liked to go out in the woods and she liked to dig holes. Her and her brother both did it. They would dig holes near their house, out in the woods farther away from their house. And she said she often used these holes that she would dig as graves for dead animals that she would find out in the woods or on the property because she wanted to give them respectful burials. Now, even though this hole/grave that they had found in the ground, in the woods, was empty, they still thought it was far too much of a stretch to think that this was a coincidence, right? Like, it wasn't a coincidence that they happened to find a perfectly sized pre-dug grave behind the home of a missing 9-year-old girl. And the person who dug this grave was said to have had blood on their pants. Especially considering there was something else that they had already found that connected this crime to Alyssa that I haven't even mentioned yet. Prior to questioning Alyssa, police had gotten permission from Karen to search their home. Alyssa did know this. They went into the home, they searched the home, and they searched Alyssa's room specifically. They searched other areas too. They searched Emma's room, but they also searched Alyssa's room. And quite a room she had. Alyssa's room was messy, bro, with like a capital M or with capital M-E-S-S-Y. It was messy. But that aside, because I mean, truth be told, as a teen, my room was definitely messy with a capital M. But my room didn't have writing all over the walls. Alyssa had taken like a pen and other things, we'll get into it, but she had written all kinds of stuff actually on her bedroom walls, not on paper taped to the walls, but on the wall itself. And she wrote things like, quote, "It was written in blood. It was written in blood." And, you know, raw with the heart because she was clearly an emo. We see that by looking at her. And drawings, like a drawing of a person, sisters, a person with slash marks on the head and the arms that said Emma. Which is weird. Some of the things on the walls looked to be written in pen or marker. Some looked to have been written in blood. And there were also like notes and cards that were taped to her wall that were messages from her father from prison. And the messages and the notes that were on the wall were said to have been of note and out of the ordinary and concerning to police. Now, if you're sitting there and you're like, okay, great, her room was messy, she wrote weird emo shit on the walls, what does this have to do with Elizabeth Olten's murder? You were saying that they found something in the room that connected her to this crime scene. What gives? You would be correct. I'm just letting you know how messy her room was because it was noteworthy. But in searching this messy room, they did find something that was very concerning. And that was in the bed. Under a blanket, they found Alyssa's diary. And this diary contained quite a bit of information that was very incriminating. Now, they didn't tell Alyssa that they had found this diary. She knew her room was searched. She didn't know they found this diary, but they did. And when they looked through it and they found words like killed and slit and throat, police brought her in for questioning. So we have the diary. We have her telling her sister not to tell anyone about the blood on her pants. And we have the pre-dug grave that she admits to digging. Okay, so 2 days after Elizabeth went missing, Alyssa is brought into the police department and she sits down with investigators and she starts to talk to them. She starts to tell them about her day on the day that Elizabeth went missing, like what she did that day. She tells them about waking up, getting ready, missing the bus, getting a ride to school, and coming home from school at about 3:30 or 4. Now, all of that she remembered pretty easily. When she's going through this rapid fire, she just knows what she did. She knows what she did. She knows what she did. Then they start asking her about what she did when she got home from school, which would have been the hours when something happened to Elizabeth. And that's when things got a little hazy for her. She said she remembers that she went for a walk in the woods. That would have been at about 5-ish, and that she was supposed to take Emma with her, but she had ditched her because like Emma was 6 and she was annoying. She said she walked through the woods. She went down to the cow pasture because she loved like animals and nature and being outside. And this was like a nice little bit of me time for her. So she walked to that area. She sat down by a creek. She admired the natural beauty, and then she went home. She said she got home from her walk at about 6 p.m. and then she went into her room. And that's when she heard screaming and crying coming from outside. So she ran out to see that her sister Emma was stuck in this thorn bush. She helped get her free. They had a conversation about the blood on her pants and that it was, from her period. And that was it. That was her day. Nothing weird here at all. She said after that, she went inside and she started getting ready for church because it was a Wednesday night and they had like youth activities. So she's getting ready and she remembers that at some point her brothers came to her door and just asked her if she knew where Elizabeth was because Elizabeth was missing at this point. And she said that she didn't, but the boys and her didn't really seem to know much of what was going on because they were kids and they weren't really in the know. They just knew that nobody knew where she was. And when her grandparents asked her if she knew where Elizabeth was, she told them that Elizabeth had just gone home. She said she went to the church thing from 7 to like 8:15 and said when she got home, she saw that there were cop cars all over the place and that there were people all over the woods searching. She says that she thought that that was a little bit odd. She didn't know that it was as serious as it was, but said that she didn't participate in the searches. She just got home, took a shower, and went to bed. She was asked how she felt when she learned that Elizabeth was missing, because that would be a pretty emotionally charged thing to happen, even if, you aren't responsible or involved. But she said that she was shocked. She was shocked that something like this could happen in their area because it was such a strange thing to happen in such a small town, basically. But she didn't seem shocked and she didn't seem moved emotionally at all. They pivot at this point and they ask her about the holes that she digs. And they're like, hey, so every hole that you dig out in the woods, do you make them shaped like graves or what? Like, what's the story there? They don't ask it exactly like that because that would be pretty leading. But they just say, like, can you explain the hole that you dug? Because that was a very, very unique hole. Are they all shaped that way? And she said no, that she just digs whatever shape comes to her mind in the moment. And on this particular day, the shape and size that came to her mind was the perfect size and shape of a grave for a 9-year-old girl. So police are like, great, okay, you like to dig holes. Sometimes they're different shapes. This time it just happened to be in the shape of a grave. No big deal. When did you dig this hole? When did you dig this grave? Because we just kind of need to put a timeline together here. And Elizabeth tells them that she must have dug it on Sunday. But as they're trying to confirm this with her timeline, and they're trying to confirm it with her grandma, because I don't know if I mentioned, but her grandma Karen was in the room during this interrogation because Alyssa was a minor. Well, Alyssa tells them that it must have been Sunday. And when they're trying to confirm this, they're like, well, it couldn't have been Sunday because Alyssa, you were visiting your mom that day. So she's like, oh, I guess it wasn't Sunday. And she starts trying to think and she's like, maybe it was Saturday. Realizes it couldn't have been Saturday. So finally lands on that she dug this hole on Friday, days before Elizabeth went missing. After this, they really get Alyssa's guard down by bantering a bit. They start talking about holes, and her grandma gets involved, and they're talking about the different holes she would dig on the property and how sometimes she and her brother would dig holes that were so large that the horses could fall in and break their legs. And they're all laughing because, ha, 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 horses breaking their legs is hilarious. And they're doing this, and they're laughing, and it's super casual. Then all of a sudden, the cop's like, ha, 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 great, great, great. So, Alyssa, did you and Elizabeth ever go for walks in the woods together alone? And immediately Alyssa is like snapped back into reality, remembers like, yeah, I'm being questioned by the police about a murder. And she tells them like, no, Elizabeth was like a girly girl and she never knew her to go into the woods. The officer asks Alyssa what she thinks happened to Elizabeth. And she said that she didn't think Elizabeth would have run away because of how young she was. And considering that police had been looking for her now for 2 days, right? It's been 2 days. She thinks that it's more likely that Elizabeth was kidnapped by somebody, that she had been abducted by somebody. And she says she knows that that's messed up, but she can't think of any other option as to what might have happened. He asks her then, okay, what type of person do you think could do something like this to a 9-year-old girl? And she responds with a sick person, the type of person who's able to put down their morals. And he says, okay, what do you think should happen to somebody who would do this to a 9-year-old girl? And she just says, well, I think they should probably get convicted. He then straight up asks her, did you do anything to Elizabeth? Did you cause her to disappear? Do you know where she is now? And to all of these questions, Alyssa answered no. After this, they start talking about the stuff that they took out of the rooms in Alyssa's house. They talk about the stuff they took out of Emma's room and the stuff they took out of Alyssa's room. They took, some of her clothes. They took some weed seeds, some medication, some bedding that had blood on it, and her diary. Now, remember, prior to this moment, she didn't know that they had her diary. And it was actually her grandmother who said it out loud because they asked Alyssa, like, do you know what we took from your house? And she starts listing things that she knew. And then her grandma goes, oh, and her diary. And I can only imagine that in this moment, it had to have been incredibly shocking to Alyssa to learn that they had that, considering what was inside of it. I'm sure when she heard those words, she just felt like her stomach was going to fall out of her butt. because inside this diary, they found that this was a very dark girl. She wrote all kinds of things in this diary. She wrote dark poetry because of the emo of it all, where she wrote things like, quote, "I cut to focus when my brain is racing. I cut to make physical what I feel inside. I cut to see blood because I like it. I don't like to cut, but I can't give it up." And, this is something that she had done for a while. If you look at photos of her, you can see that she did have like cut marks and scars up and down her arms. It's something she did for a lot of her youth. She was also the type of person who would like carve words into her skin, like hate and pain. She would bite herself. She would burn herself. And when she was 13 years old, she actually did try to take her own life. Apparently, when this happened, her grandma Karen had found her unconscious in the shower with cuts up and down her arm, the word hate carved into her arm, and apparently she had taken like 75 to 100 milligrams of Tylenol PM specifically. After this happened, she was put into a mental health facility for an extended period of time, and she did start seeing counselors and being given antidepressants. And once she was released from the hospital, she was still receiving counseling, like outpatient counseling. And after this, her grandma felt like she was on the road to recovery. Like she seemed like she was doing better. And in a review that she had with one of her therapists, like I think a month before this murder happened, they said that she did seem to be spiraling in her depression, and she was, exhibiting more delinquent behavior. But both of her therapists both said that they didn't think she was a danger to other people. They could see that she was somebody who dabbled in self-harm, and they thought that she was a danger to herself, but they never thought she would hurt somebody else. But emo writing, dark poetry, and self-harm things aside, that was not all that they found inside Alyssa's diary. They also found where she would write about wanting to hurt other people. She wrote that she wanted to burn down a house with a family inside, which is quite the hard left turn. That's hard left turn. And she also wrote, quote, "If I don't talk about it, I bottle it up. And when I explode, someone's going to die." So that's not good. But it gets worse, because the most damning thing they found inside of Alyssa's diary was a diary entry that she wrote on October 21st, the day that Elizabeth went missing. Okay, she had written something that she had tried her hardest to get rid of. She had literally taken like a blue pen and like scribbled over this in a way that I have not seen somebody do, like very intensely, so you couldn't see anything that was under it. And I truly believe that she believed that nobody was ever going to be able to see what she had written. But science do be sciencing, and they were able to use alternative light sources to see what had been written under the blue ink. And what she wrote said, quote, "I just fucking killed someone. I strangled them and slit their throat and stabbed them. Now they're dead. I don't know how to feel at the moment. It was amazing. As soon as you get over the, oh my God, I can't do this feeling, it's pretty enjoyable. I'm kind of nervous and shaky though right now. K, I gotta go to church now. LOL. Okay, I gotta go to church now. LOL. So the whole time they're questioning Alyssa, they did already found this diary. They had already gone through it. They already read what she wrote. So the whole time this officer is questioning her, he knows she's the killer. Okay, everything that was asked up until this, they already knew that she had done this. Alyssa didn't know they knew. Alyssa's grandma didn't even know that she had done this, and everything was about to come out because now this diary was in play. The diary conversation had entered the chat, and it was on. The cop asks her, "Do you think we read your diary?" And she says, "Well, if you took it, then yes, I think you did." And after that, he says nothing. He says nothing for 13 seconds, which doesn't sound very long, but that's a long time for nobody to say anything. Okay, you ready? That's 13 seconds of somebody asking you, "Do you think we read your diary?" Or you know full well that you wrote about killing somebody. And they just sit there and look at you. And finally, she just says, "What?" And then starts talking. It's like, "Oh, I'm just worried about what you guys found in there. I'm worried about what you'll see in there that's embarrassing to me." But everything about Alyssa, her demeanor, the way that she answered questions changed after the diary was entered into the conversation. She had seemed cool, calm, collected, articulate. She was even laughing. She seemed so comfortable prior to this. But now, it's like she knew that that goose was effectively cooked. She was no longer chillin'. The cop then asks her a question that sounds more like a statement when he asks her, hey, did you know that if you write something down, it's there forever? No matter what, even if you try to get rid of it, even if you scribble over it aggressively with a pen to try to hide what was written beneath it, all of it is still there. Every stroke is still there. And she does not respond. What can she say? And he goes, did you hear me? And then she just says, yes. And then he says, listen, we're just trying to find out what happened to a little girl. We need the truth here. We have your diary. We read your diary, even the last entry. And then again, he says nothing, and he uses silence to intimidate out of her by not talking for more than a minute. Do you know what more than a minute feels like? I'm not going to do that to you, but can you even imagine what she thought? And bro, her grandmother at this point, her grandma is sitting in this room, and prior to this, she has no idea that her granddaughter would have anything to do with this. But now she has to be starting to feel like, oh my God, what is going on here? Why are they getting into this line of questioning? She had at one point looked in Alyssa's diary, something that really pissed Alyssa off, but she hadn't done it since Elizabeth went missing. So now she's sitting here, she's hearing this, she's thinking, oh my God, there was something in this diary. And you can see, as soon as this starts happening, this line of questioning, she physically reacts because she's realizing that her granddaughter, who she watched be like born into this world, who she loved so much, who she did everything for, which we're going to get into eventually, the kid that is basically hers, legally hers, may have something to do with the murder of a child, or the disappearance at this point, because they haven't confirmed they know that she's dead, the disappearance of a 9-year-old. The officer is finally the first one that's going to break the silence, right? But as he goes to do it, the juvenile officer, who was also in the room at the same time, who's, there to be there with Alyssa since she's underage, she also speaks up and she's like, listen, we deal with kids all the time. There's nothing you can say that's going to surprise or shock us. Just be honest. If you know something, say it. And the main officer's like, yes, if you know something, just tell the truth. We need to know what happened. If it was an accident or not, this is not going away. He says, we need to know where she is. We need to know what happened. We need to give this family closure. If this was your little sister, you would want closure, so you need to tell us what happened. And the whole time, she's just sitting there nodding her head saying, mm-hmm. But then the cop's like, okay. I think they could tell that they kind of had her, and she was going to probably start talking because they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start at the beginning. Was this intentional? Or was this an accident? And this is when Alyssa finally admitted some responsibility, which she said, accident. And, immediately upon hearing that word, accident, her grandma just starts crying, starts freaking out. And they ask her if she wants to leave, and she says no, she'll ride it out. She just gets herself a tissue, and she gets Alyssa a tissue. But I truly can't imagine being this woman, because she really believed that Alyssa had nothing to do with it. She remembered that her and her husband noted that the night that Elizabeth went missing, Alyssa was in a great mood. She was dancing and singing as she got ready. And I was going to say that she seemed unaffected by the fact that she had done something so horrible, but it was the opposite. She seemed like she was positively affected by doing something so horrible, which is so scary to think about, because what if they didn't catch her? What if they didn't know it was her? Does it seem like she would have stopped and not done this again? I am not convinced that she would have stopped. So here's what she tells cops happened during her version of the story where this was an accident. She says that she was out walking through the woods, because remember, she said she went on a walk in the woods that day. And she said she ran into Elizabeth, who was just out there walking alone for some reason. Since the two knew each other, they decided to hang out and have some fun together. So they're walking around, messing around, when all of a sudden, Elizabeth falls and dies. She just falls backwards, hits her head, and dies instantly. She says in response to this, she freaked out. She got a lot of wood, and she burned Elizabeth's body, which we know none of this is true, right? None of what she's saying is true. This girl didn't just fall and die, and she definitely didn't get her body burned to the point where there's no body left, because bodies burning are, one, very difficult, take a very long time. It's not super easy to just burn up a body in the woods and nobody knew, and nobody had reported that there was a giant fire in the woods the day this girl went missing, and they were all out there searching. But we'll get more into that specifically in a little bit. So the cops, knowing The cop is knowing that Elizabeth was not burnt up. They're not dumb. They know that that's not something that could have happened, and it would be very unlikely that it did happen. So he pivots back to the grave, and he straight up asks Alyssa, that grave you dug, that hole, that was meant for Elizabeth, right? And she said yes. And then he again got her to admit that she had dug that grave the Friday before, days in advance before she was out playing and messing around with Elizabeth, and this accident happened. So the cop then tells Alyssa, like, listen, even if you burnt the body, like, we can recover it. And once we recover it, we can perform an autopsy and we can tell exactly what happened to her. We can tell if she fell, or we can tell something more sinister happened here. And he straight up asks her, how did you kill her? And she says, I didn't. She just died. She again tries to tell the cop the same thing, that they were playing. She fell backwards. She hit her head and she instantly died. But then the cop's like, okay, I'm going to ask you one question. Did you cut her throat? And Alyssa says yes. In that moment, Karen, Alyssa's grandma, lost it. Okay. She now knew Alyssa did do something. Alyssa had murdered this little girl, and she immediately went into hysterics. She just kept saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And like stood up and was trying everything to get out of that room. And Alyssa did seem to care about her grandma, because you can actually see her interview footage online. And in this footage, I watched it, you can see that when her grandma freaks out, her face starts to soften, and she just tells her, like, you can leave. So she gets up, she's hysterical, she's saying that she's going to pass out. She goes into the hall and she's crying and she's screaming, and they try to tell her, like, it's okay, it's going to be okay. And she just screams, like, it'll never be okay. And she was right. It would never be okay, because this girl that she loved so much and tried everything in her power to save after what she had been through growing up had just admitted to killing somebody. So with that, let's change pace a little bit and let me tell you about Alyssa's life growing up and what her grandmother saved her from, and then we'll get into the rest of what happened here. Alyssa Bustamante was born on January 28, 1994, and she was born to her mother, Michelle, who was just 15 years old when she gave birth, and her father, Caesar. Both her parents had their own set of issues. Caesar had a history of mental illness and substance abuse, being in and out of jail throughout his life, and actually so did Michelle. According to Caesar, they both abused substances, with Michelle even using drugs when she was pregnant, and they were both in and out of jail. And as far as Caesar goes, even after Alyssa was born, he even went back to prison again for assault. So he was in jail at the time that the murder took place. So the two were together, but they weren't really ready to be parents. You know what I mean? They were young. Again, Michelle's only 15 years old when she gets pregnant. They both have their fair share of issues, but that didn't stop them from, one, having Alyssa, and then from there, continuing to have additional children. They had 3 more kids, 2 boys and a girl, or at least, okay, Michelle had 3 more kids. They had the 2 boys and the girl, and I believe the boys were Caesar's. I think Emma, the little girl, I think she had a different dad, but I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Either way, though, 4 kids in this household, all while using substances and being engaged in a toxic relationship, because from what I read online, Caesar was said to have been abusive to Michelle, and this would have been in front of their kids. And then things weren't much better when he was gone, because remember I mentioned that after Alyssa was born, he went back to jail, to prison for assault, which left Michelle alone with 4 kids to raise by herself as a young mother. And this is quite the undertaking for anyone. And it was incredibly difficult for her. She didn't have the means to support all of these kids, so their lives at this time were incredibly unstable. Like, they had to move around a lot because Michelle couldn't afford to pay the rent. And just overall, she was said to be a little bit absent when it came to the kids' emotional needs. And that meant that Alyssa, being the eldest, had to take over a lot of the parenting responsibilities for her younger siblings in the absence of her mother. Now, in recognizing their daughter's shortcomings, Michelle's parents, I mentioned Karen, I don't think I mentioned Gary, but Karen and Gary decided they were going to do whatever they could to try to help out the situation. They loved Michelle and they loved these kids. Okay, these kids, their grandkids, were like their lives. Karen had even been there the moment that Alyssa was born and said that it was love at first sight. So they would do whatever they could to help. They wanted to be involved. They would get the kids what they needed. They got them a place to live. They would get them stuff they needed. They would get them food. But they realized within time this wasn't going to be enough, because Michelle was more absent than ever. Now that she wasn't the only adult that was responsible, because her parents were trying to help take on that role, she was just like, oh, great, I'm glad you're here. Now I don't have to be. And she would run off and leave the kids alone all the time. And because of this, they were just kind of wild. They were just said to be kind of unkept, and they had no structure or boundaries or guidance or affection. And kids really need consistency and guidance and love and just like round the clock care. And so they decided they were going to take the steps. Gary and Karen decided they were going to take the steps to legally adopt Alyssa and her siblings. And they were successful. They were able to get the kids when Alyssa was about 7 years old, and they were finally going to offer them something that they had never had prior to this: stability. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard like that the first, 3 years of a kid's life are the most important thing, like the most important time. And then if you're a parent, you're constantly worrying that you're like screwing your kids up by not being enough during the first 3 years. But really what I've read and what I've seen is that what they mean when they say that is that it's like the basics that kids need. They need to have food. They need to have shelter. They need to have a parent who loves them and cares about them and is with them all the time. And these are things that these kids were lacking, and that can be very detrimental for who they can turn into later. And it's not to say that that's an excuse for why Alyssa did what she did, because her siblings turned out just fine. It's just one of those things for us to look at and be like, we really need to do better by our kids so that hopefully we can have some better adults. And in Alyssa's case, she wasn't even an adult. Some stuff just got into her too young. And she said prior to moving in with her grandparents that she was abused as a child, and it was severe enough that she did see mental health care practitioners, and she was diagnosed with both PTSD and an abhorrence for violence, quote unquote, which is ironic considering what she'd go on to do. But she hid it well. Despite this darkness, she didn't really let it affect her day-to-day life. She did well in school. She got mostly A's and B's. She was popular with her friends. She appealed to the boys, and she didn't get into any real behavioral issues at school except for like the occasional bout of truancy. Well, okay, that wasn't the only thing. There was one other instance that the school noted where basically one of the counselors called Karen and told Karen that one of the students that went to Alyssa's school had noticed that she had been cutting herself. The student had told their parent, the parent told the school called Karen and told Karen. And this is one of the times that Karen made sure that she got more mental health help. And again, in the time leading up to the murder, she seemed to be doing better. To the point is, she was well at hiding who she was, because in public, she was one person. And then in the privacy of her own thoughts, she was somebody else. And the only place it really seemed to spill out was on social media, because she had like a YouTube channel and a Twitter and things like that. And in her, I believe it was her Twitter bio, she wrote that she loved to cut and she loved to kill people. She also wrote like a lot of messages, like dark themes, dark poetry. Again, she wrote about her depression and about how she wanted to die and how she just wanted to understand why life made her endure so much pain. And the thing with that is we're looking at it in hindsight and we're like, oh my God, this kid was obviously so dark and so disturbed because of what she went on to do. But when I look at this, maybe it's just because I too was an emo. I look at it and I'm like, I would have absolutely written the same things, because emo kids were just like so emo emotionally. Hello, you could slit my throat, and with that, my one last gasping breath, I'd apologize for bleeding on your shirt. You know what I mean? Like that was what emo was. So it's like one of those things where it's hard to pinpoint exactly where she showed it, because other kids could say the exact same things, and it doesn't mean they're going to go on to do what she did. But she did. But anyways, the thing with Alyssa is it didn't just spill out online. She would also talk to selective friends about this too. One of her friends that was interviewed after she was arrested said that she did remember that Alyssa would talk about wanting to kill somebody and wanting to know what it would feel like to kill somebody. She would talk about how she would do it and whether or not she thought she'd be able to get away with it. This friend said Alyssa also talked about how she wanted to see how powerful she would feel, how powerful she would feel watching the light drain out of somebody's eyes. Which I will say, I was emo. Never really thought about that, never really asked somebody what they thought about that, never really expressed wanting to know what that would be like. I will say that. But, everybody doesn't know where that line is, because Alyssa's boyfriend, because she did have a boyfriend at the time, said that Alyssa had asked him if he had any idea what it would feel like to kill somebody. And for him, he just shook it off and was like, she was emo. Emo kids say weird, dark things. And he just thought that was normal for her. Everybody just seemed to think that Alyssa was a little bit of a weird egg, but she wasn't anything that anybody would take very seriously. She was known to be like lightly violent, diet violent, if you will. Like she would scream at her little sister when she would get mad at her, and she would hit her sometimes. And she did have a YouTube channel for a time, as I stated. I think it's gone now. I tried to find it and I couldn't, but she did have a YouTube video that was up, and it's that you can still find online that other people have reposted. And during this video, she was having her little brothers get like shocked by an electric fence. In the video, she too shocked herself with the electric fence, and she said that it was like a jackass stunt. But in the videos when her brother was getting hurt, she did really seem to enjoy watching them get hurt. But that is still a far cry. It's quite the leap to go from that to violently murdering a 9-year-old child and trying to hide it. But the fact is, everybody who knew her just thought everything she said was jokes. They didn't think that she would ever actually kill someone. But I jumped ahead a little bit here. So let's get back in the timeline to when Alyssa's grandparents adopt her and her siblings, and they have custody of them and all that. At this point, I mean, their child raising days were behind them, right? They are grandparents at this point, but now they're going from having no kids to having 4 kids. And that is quite the undertaking. And also that's a lot of people, and you've got to have the space for it. So about a year after they had all been living together, they decided that they were going to get a bigger place. They were going to move to a new place to give the kids a lot of space to run and to play and to grow and to live. And so they, as a family, moved to St. Martin's, Missouri. They got a nice big house on a large plot of land, and the kids seemed to be doing really well in this new small town life with their big house and lots of land and horses. Well, most of the kids seemed to be doing well. Basically all of them but Alyssa. She did seem to be having trouble adjusting to the new life she was living. She had tried to go out and make some friends. She even had a boyfriend at the time that she seemed to like quite a bit, but it just didn't seem to be enough for her. Her mother had promised her she would come and visit her quite a bit, quite often as she could while they were out there, but her mother hadn't, and her father was in prison. And even though they weren't particularly good for her when she was growing up, they were all she knew, and she loved her parents. So though her grandparents were doing everything they could to give her the best chance, moving her to this beautiful, serene, happy place and putting her in therapy to try to get her the help she needed, there was just something within her that was not healed at this point. It was clear that she had seen and experienced some things prior to them taking her in that she hadn't dealt with. Her grandparents even said that they believe bad things happened to her when she was with her parents, and that she just has yet, I don't know if she has yet, but at the time that I was researching this, she had never expressed what those bad things may have been. But it does seem like her grandparents are onto something, because when she was interviewed by police, she told them that she's not sure if anything bad happened to her because she can't really remember much of her life prior to going home with her grandparents. And she was old enough that she should have retained some of that information, so she's either choosing to forget it or she doesn't remember. And if she doesn't, it seems like there would be a reason, perhaps. I'm not a doctor, but it seems like perhaps there could be a reason that she could be blocking that out. Now, I want to make it clear, I am not making excuses for Alyssa. I'm not the one to do something like that. I never have been. I don't have sympathy for killers, man. I just don't. I can't find myself to have it, especially a child killer. I know she was a kid herself, but she's a kid who made a choice. And I'm just telling you all of her backstory that's her in a nutshell. That's her in a nutshell. And she has just admitted to slitting the throat of a 9-year-old. So let's move on from there. Once Karen was out of the room after Alyssa had just admitted to killing this little girl, they continued with their interrogation. This is something that Karen says she wished didn't happen. She wished she had been in the room when the interview was happening, or she wished that they had stopped the interview since she wasn't there, but they didn't. They continued to question her. The cop tells her, I think you knew you were going to do this. I think you planned it. I think you went out that day to dig that grave for Elizabeth, but as you started to dig it, you realized that the dirt was too hard. The earth beneath the loose dirt was too hard, so you couldn't dig the entire grave, and that's why it was so shallow. And he tells her that even though it was too shallow and you couldn't finish the grave, I think you still lured Elizabeth out there with the plans to murder her. And once she got out there, you did just that. You cut her throat. Is that correct? And she says yes. She says she dug the grave the Friday before the murder because she knew she was going to do it. She said that Friday she literally got up, got ready for school, took the bus to school, then came back home instead of going to class, dug this grave, then went back to the school and caught the bus home at the end of the day to make it seem like none of that happened. She said that Wednesday she got Emma to go over to Elizabeth's house to ask her if she wanted to play. Having no idea why Alyssa wanted her to do that, she just wanted somebody to play with. So Elizabeth came back to the house and they played in the woods for a while with Alyssa there before finally Alyssa told Emma she needed to go home so that Elizabeth could go home. Emma needed to go in the house because Elizabeth was going to be going home. So Emma left, but Elizabeth didn't get to because Alyssa told her, hey, I want to show you something cool. And this part of the story does actually line up with something that Elizabeth's brother told police after his sister went missing. So his mother had told him to go out and look for Elizabeth after she went missing. You remember when she realized that Karen said that Elizabeth had never been at the house, she sent out her son, Patty, Elizabeth's mother, sent out her son to go and look for Elizabeth. Well, he said when he was out there, he didn't see Elizabeth, but he did see Alyssa and Emma walking up a hill out of the woods, and that he heard Alyssa tell Emma, don't tell anyone. He says that he asked them. He asked her, Alyssa, and he asked Emma if they knew where Elizabeth was, and they said no. And when I heard this part of the story, it made my whole body go into chills because something about that makes me feel like it's possible that little Emma could have seen more than we know. And I just hope so much that I'm reading too much into that mentally and that that's not the case. In Alyssa's first confession, because it does change a couple of times, but in her first confession, she said that once her and Elizabeth were alone, she took a black-handled kitchen knife that she told police they'd be able to find in her dishwasher because she just took it home and washed it. She says she took that and she cut Elizabeth's throat from behind, and that once she was on the ground, she stabbed her, saying that she just stabbed her twice, but the autopsy showed that Elizabeth had been stabbed 8 times. She literally said that the two were at a creek and Elizabeth had her back to her and she just ambushed her and cut her throat without her having any idea what was going on or why. And Alyssa too says she has no idea why she did what she did. She said she doesn't even know why she chose Elizabeth specifically. There was nothing about her in particular that made it so Alyssa would want to kill her. She said straight up that she just wanted to know what it felt like to kill somebody. As the police officer pushes her further, and as the juvenile detective that was there pushes her further, they're able to get her to admit more. And what they get her to admit is that cutting her throat wasn't the first thing that Alyssa did to Elizabeth. She first strangled her with her bare hands while she looked into Elizabeth's eyes. While Elizabeth's facing her, she strangles her to the point of unconsciousness with her bare hands. When she lets her go, she falls to her back. And that's when she proceeds to cut this girl's throat. She says she then stabbed her, which we already knew. And then instead of burning her, because obviously she didn't burn her, she says she buried her. She tells police that the Friday before the murder, she had actually dug 2 holes in the woods out there. The one that they found, which was the ground was too hard for her to have dug deep enough to actually bury Elizabeth. And then a second hole, the one that she used to actually bury this child. Now, after police hear this entire story, things aren't entirely adding up in their minds, and they think that it's likely or possible or likely. I'm not in their heads, I don't know for sure. But they don't think Alyssa acted alone. They thought it was possible that somebody else was involved, and they specifically thought it was her boyfriend who was involved, who I was going to name, but I think we're just going to call him boyfriend. And this is a guy that Alyssa says knew nothing about this and had never even known that Alyssa did this. She says she didn't even admit to him that she did this, so he definitely wasn't involved. Now, the reason that police thought that somebody else may have done this with Alyssa is that when they were doing their investigation and they had been talking to people, with the roadblocks and everything, they had talked to a few people who said that they had actually seen somebody near the woods at the time that Elizabeth went missing. And this was a young man. They saw a young man with a dark shirt and baggy pants standing next to a guardrail. And when they described what this boy looked like to police were like, that kind of sounds like Alyssa's boyfriend. And then one of the witnesses who said they saw this boy was shown a photo of Alyssa's boyfriend. And when they saw it, they were like, that does look like the kid I saw. Now, this boy did end up being given an interview and a polygraph test, and he seemed incredibly nervous. He was fidgeting a lot. He was biting his nails, and this could be because he wasn't being entirely truthful, because police came to him after his polygraph test, and they said that the answers he gave during this examination, and the questions were, quote, did you physically cause her death? Did you physically take her life? And did you do anything physical that ended her life? And he answered no to all 3 of these questions, but his body reacted anxiously. So they look at him, they're like, listen, we know you're lying. We know you have information that you're not telling us, and you just need to be so for real with us right now. And he just tells them, like, listen, I don't know anything. All I know is what the FBI told me. And they told him, like, listen, we talked to you, we talked to Alyssa, we talked to all your friends, we talked to all Alyssa's friends, and your polygraph test is showing that you're being deceptive. And they also tell him, like, listen, we have witnesses that put you near the woods the day this little girl was killed. We had somebody pick your photo out of a lineup. We know you were there. And this kid looks this cop straight in the face and was like, I was not there. Very matter of fact. Now, after this boyfriend had kept his mouth shut for quite some time, the cop started to steer the questions towards Alyssa instead of at him. And it was after doing that that they finally got him to break. And he admitted that Alyssa had told him she had killed Elizabeth. He said she had actually come to his house the day after the murder, sat down and told him what she did. He said that she didn't get into specifics and he didn't ask, but that she told him that she strangled and cut this little girl. Now, police weren't really buying his story because truth is that it did seem to be weird. The more specifics that he said, the more they were like, this doesn't quite add up. Like, okay, he said it was Thursday because it was the day after the murder, right? It was Thursday. And he says he stayed home from school sick that day. And he said because he stayed home sick, Alyssa decided that she was going to ditch school so that she could come over to the house, spend time with him, and smoke some weed. So he says that they were doing that. And around 12:30, 1 o'clock, his mother came home unexpectedly. They were not expecting her to be there. So he hid Alyssa in a closet and gave her a change of clothes. He said that he had her stay in the closet while his mother took a shower and periodically went in to check on her while she was in there, like Alyssa. And he said it was during one of the times that he went in and checked on her in the closet that she admitted what she did. And he says that when she admitted this, he told her that she needed to leave. It would be best that she be gone when his mom got out. So he just snuck her out the door while his mom was in the shower. And he says that's the last time that he talked to her. He just told police, like, I wasn't there and I didn't know about this murder prior to it happening. And even though the story was very, very strange, because it is, they seem to believe him. And I think part of why they believe him is one, evidence. Evidence didn't show that he was there. Just spoiler alert, it was just Alyssa. But they, I think, had such a hard time believing that it was just Alyssa. But they asked him, like, why did you lie for her if you didn't have anything to do with this? And he just said he was afraid of her. He said that he was afraid because he knew now what she was capable of. And he said that what if she had found out that he helped the police learn information on her, which helped get her put into jail, and she decided to become obsessed and come back for him after the fact. He said he was worried that she would get bail, like get out of jail on bail, figure out a way to remove her ankle bracelet. I've tried to say that like 4 times. Ankle bracelet, and then come and murder him and his family. He has said that this situation with Alyssa has traumatized him. He can't believe he was with somebody like her, somebody who could do something like that, and he doesn't believe he'll be able to ever trust being in a relationship with somebody again, because what if deep down they're like this as well? And the cop he was telling this to was actually kind of a dick about it and like laughed in his face. So I was like, oh, poor guy. Like it wasn't a big deal. And then the lady cop was like, listen, don't worry about it. We're not all crazy like that. To which I'm like, I'm sure there are some guys out there that would disagree with that statement and do think that all of us women are crazy like that. But all of this is to say that this boy was never charged with anything. This boyfriend was never charged with anything. I bring it up because I feel like it illustrates just how like in disbelief the cops were that Alyssa could have done something like this, being a 15-year-old girl, that she could think of and plan out and execute a murder this horrible all by herself, all out of her own brain without a man being the driving force. Because when, I don't know about you, but oftentimes when you think of something violent, you're like, oh, a man must have done it. A little 15-year-old girl, it could never be. They even tried to imply at one point to her that her grandfather was involved in doing this as well, and that she was covering up for him, but she was adamant that that was not the case. She says it was her and her alone who did this, and she is the only one who has ever been arrested, and she's the only one who went to trial for doing this. It was just her. Once Alyssa was done being questioned by police, they took her to the woods so that she could show them where she had buried Elizabeth. It was October 23rd when she led them to the hole where she had buried this child with her bare hands, covering her with dirt and twigs and leaves. And one of the officers who was there at the time Elizabeth was recovered said of this quote, "It was not well covered. Once she pointed out the area, you looked a little closer, and you could see she was only a few inches, if that, under the ground. And you could see body parts that came up covered with mud." After Elizabeth's body was recovered, her mother had the impossible task of having a funeral for a 9-year-old. And I read about it and I saw photos of it, and it is enough to absolutely break your heart. She was a little girl, a little princess, and her funeral reflected that. She was buried in a pink casket, and this pink casket was taken to the cemetery by a horse-drawn carriage like Cinderella. And people who were present wore pink and released pink balloons into the sky. And you know what's incredibly tragic here is that Elizabeth's dad wasn't even able to go to her funeral because he was in jail at the time. He had gotten, I believe it was like a little bit over 19 years for weapons charges or something like that. I can't remember the specifics, but he had tried to get permission to leave for one day to go to his daughter's funeral, but he was unable. So he couldn't say his goodbye, and it left Patty to do this alone with her 2 kids. She had to do this all by herself and endure this all by herself. I can't even imagine being Patty, dude, to do all this and then to do all of this while knowing what this monster did to your child. And I do believe that Patty thinks Alyssa is a monster because she said of Alyssa, quote, "There's no way she could even be human to do that to a child." To know Alyssa did that and to know that she had dug the grave days in advance because it was planned, and the motive for why she did this just for a thrill, just to see what it was like, and found that she liked it. I feel like as a mother, that would be too much for your heart and mind to even fully comprehend. Ever since her murder, her family, Elizabeth's family, celebrates all important holidays, all important milestones at Elizabeth's grave. And a friend of the family who was at one point the spokesperson for the family, this was a woman named Pam, she said, quote, "We can't hug her, hear her voice. Everything is gone but our memories." So Alyssa Bustamante was arrested, and she was charged with the first-degree murder of Elizabeth Olten. And despite giving a full confession and leading police to the body, she was pleading not guilty. Now, because of Alyssa's age, they weren't really sure how they were going to try her, but they did end up determining that due to the viciousness of the murder, she was going to be tried as an adult, because they basically said that the juvenile justice system was ill-equipped to handle somebody like Alyssa. So she was held without bail while she awaited to be tried as an adult. Now, I mentioned that Alyssa was pleading not guilty. Well, basically, her defense attorney was going to try and say that she was not guilty due to her mental health conditions, with them stating that she had been diagnosed with major depression, anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder from her difficult upbringing, borderline personality disorder, and they said that she showed early signs of bipolar disorder. They tried to state that because of this, Alyssa didn't know right from wrong, even though her own doctors disagreed with that. And they also noted that Alyssa's dosage of Prozac was raised shortly before the murder, and the defense is saying that this could have made it so that Alyssa was more prone to violence. Now, listen, I know that people have differences of opinions when it comes to Prozac and like strong feelings. I have seen that in comments in the past. What I will say is I don't know nothing about nothing when it comes to that. All I know is what I've read from people who are much smarter than me on the subject, or just smarter than me in general, and people who worked on this case. Basically, her own doctor said, like, listen, we believe she was depressed. We believe she showed signs of being bipolar, but we do not believe that she didn't know right from wrong. And we don't believe that raising her dosage of Prozac made her more violent, because Prozac doesn't cause murders. They said that that is the field's opinion, that's the FDA's opinion, and that is their opinion. Now, the prosecution had a pretty rock-solid case against Alyssa with all of the evidence they had, but then also that confession. But there was one problem. Okay, you remember how during Alyssa's interrogation, while she was being questioned by police, but before her confession, the juvenile officer, the lady cop, had interjected and been like, "Oh, Alyssa, if you know something, just tell the truth." Well, apparently, that was a big no-no. Now, I'm not going to lie. I don't really understand 100% why, but basically what they said is that she was supposed to be there as Alyssa's advocate. So by telling Alyssa that if she knew something, she needed to say it, she fumbled the ball big time. And when this case eventually went to court, Alyssa's confession got thrown out because of that. Imagine being that lady. You know she just got a talking to. Because they cited deceptive tactics to get Alyssa to confess to the crime. So she was set to be tried as an adult for the first-degree murder of Elizabeth Olten, and her trial was set to begin in January of 2012. But the day before she was supposed to go to trial, she actually accepted a plea deal. Alyssa Bustamante was going to be pleading guilty to second-degree murder and waiving her right to a jury trial. And what that meant was she had to stand in front of a judge and in a courtroom full of people who hated her, people wearing t-shirts in support of Elizabeth, of justice for Elizabeth, and tell all these people exactly what happened that day. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're like me, hearing that she was able to accept a plea deal for second-degree murder, it pissed me off, bro, because this was 100% a premeditated crime. But the thing was, when it came to this case, it was just all about the wrong place and the wrong time. Because at this time, when Alyssa went to trial, there were these two other cases in the news that involved two 14-year-old boys, and the Supreme Court was considering whether it would be appropriate to give minors life without parole, citing that it might be too harsh of a punishment for youthful offenders. On top of that, Alyssa did have some mitigating factors when you brought in all the stuff that the defense said about her mental health issues. So I think you take that and you add the politics of it all, and I believe that is what influenced the prosecution to offer Alyssa this deal in the first place, when maybe they shouldn't have. But you'll have to let me know down below whether or not you think that was appropriate. But she was given this deal. So she went to court, and in a very monotone voice, she described to the court exactly what happened to Elizabeth, while her mother, Patty, listened and sobbed. Okay, because she was listening to all the details of what happened to her daughter out in the woods that day. And the person who did it, the person who is telling the story of what happened, didn't seem to have any remorse for it at all. During Alyssa's sentencing phase, the prosecution talked about Elizabeth and talked about the community. They talked about the horror that her family felt not knowing where she was and having to exist as hours changed to day and day turns to night, not knowing where their 9-year-old child was. He talked about all the people, the police and the community who went out there and cried and searched and stressed over the fate of this girl, while Alyssa could not care less. And if anything, she was happy because of what had happened, because of what she did. He then asked the judge to give Alyssa the sentence of life in prison plus an additional 71 years for the additional charges. And he told the court, quote, "The motive has to be the most senseless, most reprehensible there could be in humankind, and that is to take a life for a thrill." And after the prosecution asked for this sentence, Elizabeth's grandmother yelled out, quote, "I think Alyssa should get out of jail the same day Elizabeth gets out of the grave." Louder for those in the back. Now, if you're curious if Alyssa ever apologized, she did. She addressed the court directly when she said, and I quote, "I really am extremely sorry for everything. I know words can never be enough to describe how horribly I feel for all this. If I could give my life to get her back, I would. I'm sorry." This was an apology that felt incredibly empty for Elizabeth's mother, who just simply did not believe that Alyssa was sorry and instead thought this apology was more to serve as an aid to get her a lighter sentence. With that, Alyssa Bustamante would be sentenced to life in prison plus an additional 40 years. And it wasn't life in prison with no possibility of parole. She would have the possibility for parole. And the first time that she would be eligible for parole the first time she'd be eligible for parole was supposed to be in 2044, though that would change. Alyssa did try to appeal, saying that her attorneys during her trial were ineffective, but the judge disagreed and refused to set aside her judgment or give her a new trial, which is what she was asking for. But that wasn't the only method that she had to get her sentence changed. And that is because, unfortunately, in 2021, there was a criminal justice bill in play. This is the Senate Bill 26, and Elizabeth's family petitioned the government to veto this bill because in this bill, which included other things, there was a plan to change the way that the state handled parole. And basically, it would allow a person convicted of a crime like Alyssa, who had lengthy sentences, to be able to ask for parole after just 15 years. And they didn't want Alyssa to have the chance to get parole that soon after what she did. A statement from this group who petitioned the government said, quote, "Bustamante fantasized about murdering people, devised a plan to murder Elizabeth, and then carried out the murder. She poses a significant risk and should not be allowed to victimize others ever again." Unfortunately, though, they were unsuccessful, and because this bill was passed, that meant that people like Alyssa, including Alyssa, could ask for parole after just 15 years. So her first parole hearing actually came up in 2024. And what's super fucked up about this is that Elizabeth's family, for years prior to this, were also trying to change the law. They were trying to make Senate Bill 754 happen. And what that would mean, in addition to other things, is that youths found guilty of second-degree murder would not be eligible for parole. And they were intending to call this Elizabeth's Law. Now, they did get this put into motion, but the governor had not signed it yet. So on Mother's Day of 2024, Patty woke up to an automated phone call inviting her to attend the parole hearing of her daughter's killer. Now, she did go and she put herself through the pain of sitting there and reliving the experience and hearing Alyssa explain how and why she had murdered her 9-year-old daughter, all while adding new details that weren't able to be presented at trial. And she said she put herself through this just so she could ensure that this girl did not get released. And thankfully, she was not released. She will be kept in jail, and her next parole hearing is not until 2029. And one thing that I guess is a silver lining here in some way, if you want to find one of those, is that even if she does get released, let's hope she doesn't get released, but if she does, she will still be punished monetarily. In response to Elizabeth's murder, Patty did file a wrongful death suit against Alyssa, which settled for $5 million. And Alyssa is also required to inform Patty if she receives any compensation from the publicity of the case. How can they monitor that? I really do not know, but this is what she has been ordered to do. And, that's all good and well. But I think what Elizabeth's family would want more is for Alyssa never to get out of jail. I mean, what they want most is to have Elizabeth back, but she's gone. That's not a possibility. She's gone forever because of what Alyssa did. And Patty said of this in part, and I quote, "Elizabeth never gets to get married. She never gets to walk down the aisle, never gets to go to her first dance, have her first boyfriend. So much has been lost at the hands of this evil monster. If it were up to me, this admitted murderer would never see the light of day again. I will just say that I hate her. I hate everything about her." And you know what? I think that's justified. I do know that there are so many people out there who survive by forgiveness, but I don't think that it has to be that way. I don't think that I would be able to be that way. And I think that that's just fine. I think that she has the right to hate Alyssa Bustamante for the rest of her life. And I think it's totally okay for her to want to keep this girl in jail until the day she dies. Like, I cannot even imagine what it would be like if she was to actually get released for a multitude of reasons. One, Elizabeth's poor family. I cannot even imagine how much it would feel like an injustice if this girl was released anytime soon, because she literally killed a 9-year-old girl. And I know she was just 15 years old when it happened, but it still feels like it would be such a slap in the face to not have her serve a really significant chunk of time in jail. You'll have to let me know if you agree, but for this murder to be so thought through, so planned, so brazen, and for her to be so happy after the fact, I find that to be incredibly frightening. So that's one thing. That's actually two things. One, her family not getting justice. Two, her being a frightening little shit. Okay. And three, and this is one that's a little bit, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention it, but I feel like I have to. There is the additional layer that there's been a very interesting response to Alyssa and her crimes from particularly young counterculture kids online who have sort of made Alyssa into a bit of like a celebrity in their minds. Like, okay, the weirdos who are obsessed with Richard Ramirez and more recently all the women who are obsessed with Wade Wilson. You remember that? Those two dickhead losers who people were obsessed with because they thought they were hot despite the fact that they were actually both pretty gross. Well, there are literally online fan clubs and Facebook groups supporting Alyssa and like showing her artwork, and people have even made pages pretending to be her, using her like photos. And I have seen this dude, and looking for Alyssa's social media pages, I came upon more than one page, and it's just disgusting. And not just the person who made it, but those who follow and interact, sending messages to her, even though they know it's not her, saying things like, "You can murder me for free." There's a Facebook page that I saw specifically that was dedicated to her. And I went through it and I read the comments, and there was a mixture of disgust and obsession. There were people on there literally saying like, "Oh, big deal, everybody dies eventually." And then there were also guys on there who were commenting on like every single picture of this girl, which a lot of these pictures are from when she was 15, you nasty fucks. And in these photos, they're talking about how beautiful she is and how she's so perfect. People were literally saying that she had problems, so what she did wasn't really her fault, and said that she needed understanding, not hate. And then there are also people in the comments who are threatening other people in the comments, like people who are saying like, oh, if you hate her, if you talk shit about Alyssa, I'm going to cut you. I'm going to kill you. There are people like that. I just find the whole thing so gross. And it reminds me so much of like when Michael Alig was released. Do you remember when I covered that case forever? He's the killer who inspired the movie Party Monster. And when he got released from jail, there were straight up people like outside waiting for him. There were people who came to pick him up at the jail to have like a party with him. And they were like blasting music. And I think some people even brought like inflatable hammers, which is so disgusting because a hammer is the tool that he used to kill Andre Mendez. It's just the type of thing that makes me uncomfortable. People's obsession with her makes me uncomfortable because it seems like so often in these cases, the victim gets lost and everyone talks about the killer. Before I really looked into this case myself, I had heard the name Alyssa Bustamante. I hadn't really heard Elizabeth's name. And that's such a fucking shame, dude. It's so unfortunate because it's like, okay, was Alyssa, did she have a hard life? Yes. Was she young when she did this? Yes. But you know who was younger? Elizabeth. Elizabeth, who Alyssa murdered. Her life is gone. She is gone forever because of what Alyssa did. And that's what people need to remember. And you know what? I think I want to end this video with a quote from Elizabeth's family that perfectly echoes this sentiment. They said, and I quote, "Please don't forget who Elizabeth was. Please don't let the circumstances take away from the beautiful child, beautiful person she would have been and grown into. We want her remembered." And that's very, very, very important. And with that, my friends, is the story of the murder of Elizabeth Olten. I hope you found it to be informative. I hope I gave you all the information you would want when looking into this case. And of course, I just want to thank you for remembering Elizabeth with me today. Now, considering everything I told you throughout this video, I want to revisit the question of the day, and that was this. Do you think because Alyssa was 15 years old, she should ever have been given the opportunity for parole? I know she was, and there's no changing that, but I'm curious if you agree with that. And also, do you agree that she should have been given a second-degree murder conviction? How do these things make you feel? Laying in a therapist's chair, how do you feel about that? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I am curious to hear what you have to say. Anyways, guys, before you leave, please don't forget to leave me a comment down below with whatever case you'd like to see me cover in the future. As you know, I have a long list of cases, and whenever you leave me a suggestion, I put it on my list with your name next to it, so if I do cover it, I can give you a shout out. I love looking into the cases you guys suggest because they're often cases I haven't heard of or cases that need more coverage, and I know you're filled with great ideas and great taste, otherwise you would not be here. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week, sometimes 2 a week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. One of us. One of us. One of us. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my membership and a link to my merch store. If you don't already know, now you know that what you're watching and or listening to is also a podcast. If you search True Crime with BRATTERSTEIN on any podcast platform, you will find me. And if you want to go, listen, subscribe, do a star, whatever it is that you want to do, I would appreciate it. I'm new and I'm trying to get into the algorithm. And if you're not interested in that, that's also fine. I just want to thank you for being here. And now with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. I hope to see you in my next video. And in the meantime, take care of yourself.